Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition is Legend of Kage, brought to us by Taito. Based on the arcade game of the same name released in 1985, Legend of Kage for the NES added a few extra levels to the main game that were not present in the arcade version. Like many other early NES games, there is a score system in the game to see how high of a score you can get, but the game does have an ending. Each run through the game is broken up into 5 different levels, and you complete those sets of levels 3 times in order to actually complete the game and actually receive an ending for your efforts. So here we go with Legend of Kage for the NES. Released in 1986 for the Famicom and brought over to North America in 1987, the game was released on a ton of different other home consoles and home computer systems around this time, including of course most recently being released for the Virtual Console, and actually received a sequel in Legend of Kage 2 for the Nintendo DS 22 years after the original game came out. The storyline for the game is very simplistic. You play as a ninja named Kage while you're trying to save a princess named Kiri who was kidnapped, as you can see in the opening cutscene. Your goal, of course, is to fight an evil force at the end of the levels in order to actually save her. Interestingly enough though, since the game is broken up into 3 different cycles, each cycle not only has a different season or time of year that it takes place in, you actually do fight a different boss at the end of each cycle. The first level starts off in the summer area as you're running through a very large forest. Start off by running over to the left as fast as you possibly can, throwing shurikens along the way. You jump with the up button, which of course is a little unusual for the NES, but not a completely uncommon thing. And you can actually grab on the trees, climb up the trees, and hang on to them in order to get up the higher distances. Eventually, by running to the left, you'll run into a dead end. Backtrack just a little bit to a clearing that we passed just a few seconds ago. When in this clearing, run back and forth, keep taking out enemies left and right, whether it's the blue or the red ninjas, or you have the blue guys firing fireballs. Eventually, a red guy will appear. Defeat this red wizard-like guy and you'll move on to the second level of the game. The second level being in the sewer system of the castle that Kiri is being held in. All you have to do in this level is jump out of the water so you have a much easier time of getting around, then run back and forth firing your shurikens or using your sword weapon in order to take out the ninjas. Take out 10 ninjas in order to complete the segment. While this game is classic arcade style difficulty, it's not overwhelming by any means, using both different attacks, the shurikens and the sword, to help you out, including the sword being able to actually deflect other projectiles back from some of the enemies. You do die in one hit, but overall it's not too bad. The third level of the game, as you saw, you just climb upwards. Just keep jumping straight up, avoid getting hit, and eventually you'll reach the top and complete the segment. For level 4, you're reaching the final few floors of the actual castle to save Kiri. Run all the way to the left and then up the stairs, run to the right and up the stairs, and then back over to the left, and finally one more floor in order to save Kiri, taking out all the ninjas and other enemies along the way. When you make it to Kiri on the top floor, be sure to use your sword to save her, and then the game will automatically take over as you and Kiri escape from the castle. You'll make it to the roof and you'll end up running off and jump off into another forest-like clearing that we were at the beginning of the game. However, as you're running through, Kiri will get kidnapped again and it's time to actually face the boss of the first cycle. Defeating the bosses is actually a little bit of a challenge if you don't know what you're doing the first time around. You can't just directly attack the boss. Instead, you actually have to attack the butterfly that's flying around the boss. Thankfully, you can throw shurikens in all directions, and after you deliver enough hits to the butterfly will die, and this will allow the opportunity for you to actually do damage to the boss. Defeat the boss and you move on to the next cycle, which you can see now is taking place in autumn. Now, of course, the difficulty does definitely increase when you make it to the next cycle. The enemies are a little bit faster, there's a little bit more of them, and you'll find yourself getting killed a little bit more, especially on your first few times playing the game. However, the strategy for the levels is remaining exactly the same. We're going to start off by running all the way to the left to that last clearing, then run back and forth and take out as many enemies as we need to in order for the red wizard-like guy to appear so that we can move on to the next level. Unfortunately, there's no real easy way to get this guy to appear, so you may have to take out 10 or 20 guys before eventually that red guy will appear so you can finally complete the segment. Be very careful of the long ranges of some of the attacks. The shurikens you can deflect with your sword attack, but you won't be able to deflect the fireballs back, so you'll have to jump over those from the blue guys. Eventually though, the guy will show up, take a nice shuriken right to the face, and we can move on to the second level of the second cycle. Of course, the color scheme has changed a little bit now that it's autumn here even in the sewer system, but you're just moving back and forth taking out 10 ninjas. For the second and third cycles of the game, this segment can be a lot more deadly as the guys are moving a lot quicker and there's a lot more of them. They also like to jump a lot more at you, allowing them to get some quick sword or shuriken attacks on you as you're trying to jump straight up. Interesting to note though that the arcade game actually only has 2 cycles like I mentioned earlier. And this version ended up adding a third extra cycle, so usually it's the arcade version that has more than the NES version, as we saw with games like Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. However, in Legend of Kage, the NES version actually has more levels. As we make it to the top of the tower for the second time around, we save Kiri and once again climb up to the rooftop and run off trying to save her again, but unfortunately, another ninja is ready to swoop in from the trees and kidnap her, so we have to get ready for another boss fight. While the boss actually is different, like I mentioned before, the boss is actually different through each cycle, his strategy for him pretty much remains the same of attacking the butterfly first in order to defeat it, and then wait for a good opportunity to use the shuriken or the sword attack on the boss when he gets close to you in order to take him out and move on to the third and final cycle, which of course, this time around, it's winter. There's some pretty nice effects here of the ground as well as the trees being covered in snow. However, we can't really just look at it for too long because the enemies have definitely ramped up once again in difficulty for the third and final cycle. Just like always though, our goal is to run all the way over to the left, get to that nice clearing, and then take out a bunch of guys in order to wait for that one guy to finally show up. One strategy I always like to do is if I see a guy quickly appear from the left side and I don't have a shuriken ready or I won't be able to get one out quick enough, if he's coming towards me, I usually like to jump up into the air as soon as he starts appearing. That way, in case if he does fire a fireball or shuriken, I should be able to get up in the air just in time to avoid that fireball. Finally, the guy shows up and we can take him out and move on to the winter sewer style level. The ninjas here are a little bit more aggressive, but overall this is still probably the easiest overall of the levels in the game. For the third time climbing up the tower, sometimes I like to actually jump back and forth left and right instead of heading just straight up. This gives a little bit more variety to my own movements, allowing me to avoid some of the guys a little bit more easily. Some nice color scheme here as we're traveling up the final few floors in order to make it to the top to save Kiri for the third and final time. Just keep firing their shurikens or use your sword as you're running through quickly, not really stopping to even turn around and take out anybody who may even appear behind you. You'll once again be able to make it to the top and save Kiri, and you'll do the same thing as before, jumping up to the very top and jumping off the roof. Just like always though, she will end up getting taken away, and you'll have to fight another boss. However, once you defeat the third and final boss though, you actually do get to save Kiri permanently. Usually I like to climb up the very first tree, wait for that butterfly to appear, and then immediately spam my shurikens. The third boss can be a little bit of a pain because he likes to hover in the air, but if you get underneath of him, do a jump up into the air and hit him with your sword, he'll be done and you can enjoy the short ending. And there you have your ending. Now the game will actually go back to the first cycle, and you can start the game all over again, trying to get an even higher score. Legend of Kage may not be the most memorable of the Ninja NES titles, but it's still a very fun arcade experience, and one that I remember playing multiple times. It also happens to be one of the first NES games I was actually able to beat as a kid. And if you're interested in the game, of course you may be able to actually find an old arcade somewhere, but you can also actually play the game on the Wii's Virtual Console. It was part of the arcade compilation of Taito Legends 2, and actually they made a 3D reimagined version of the game on Taito Legends Powered Up, which was available on the PSP. And of course there's also the previously mentioned sequel to the game, Legend of Kage 2, which was released in 2008 for the Nintendo DS. That may be a little bit difficult to find, but if you're a fan of this game, it's definitely worth checking out. But either way, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.